Welcome to Schneb's Media and Politics NY in tonight's debate, where we focus on New York's Congressional District 3. I'm Stephen Witt, political editor of Politics NY, joined by my co-moderator, amNewYork Editor-in-Chief Robert Pozarycki, who will serve as timekeeper and ask some of the questions. How are you doing tonight, Robert?
I'm doing very well, Stephen. Thank you very much for having us, and welcome to the candidates here. I'm looking forward to a great debate here.
Thank you.
Right. So tonight's debate is for Congressional District 3, encompassing parts of Queens, including Douglaston, Bayside, Little Neck, Glen Oaks, Queen Village, Whitestone, and the Long Island towns that include Great Neck, Port Washington, Old Westbury, Mineola, Glen Cove, Bayville, Cove Neck, and Oyster Bay. Am I missing any towns that?
A few of them, but you got the gist of it.
A few of them.
Northampton, Glen Cove, Oyster Bay.
And
and the newer parts of the district, right? Mineola, Levittown, Farmingdale, Plainview, Syosset.
Okay. Now this primary is kind of up for grabs after Tom Suozzi vacated the seat in his unsuccessful run for governor. And there are a host of candidates running to replace Suozzi. Add that to the first ever primary in August. So it's a hot August, right? And we've got one hot, exciting race. Tonight's four candidates are Jon Lafazan.
Josh, sorry, Steve.
I'm sorry, Joshua
That's okay.
Lafazan, Melanie D'Arrigo, Robert Zimmerman, and Jon Kaiman. So those are the four candidates. And first, for the ground rules. Each candidate will have 90 seconds for an opening statement. Then we begin the questioning with a 1-minute reply. Candidates who wish to rebut that statement will have 30 seconds. Time permitting, we will also allow each candidate 1 minute to ask another candidate in the race a question and give that candidate 1 minute to answer. We call that the cross-examination round, right? We will conclude with a 90-second closing statement from each candidate. Robert will keep close watch on the time. And do we have an alarm, or he will give a verbal warning? He might have a bell, I think, when the time is up, allowing the candidate to finish your thought. But after a second warning, we will interrupt and stop you. So if everybody's ready, let's begin. I want you each to introduce yourself and begin with your opening statement. And we will start in alphabetical order with Melanie D'Arrigo.
Great. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Melanie D'Arrigo. I'm running to be the next congressional member of New York 3 and the first Congresswoman ever to represent the seat. So we're very excited. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I grew up in Suffolk County. I started my family in Queens, and I am raising my 3 amazing children in Port Washington and Nassau County. I spent my career in preventive health, and I'm also a community organizer. I co-founded an LGBTQ nonprofit in North Hempstead, where I organized the very first Pride celebration in the history of the town. I also served as the Medicare for All District 3 rep with National Nurses United Nursing Union. And I am a delegate for the National Organization for Women, where I'm also an endorsed candidate. Additionally, I'm a longtime Moms Demand Action volunteer and the only congressional candidate in New York to be endorsed by Everytown for gun safety. I am ready to bring a fresh new voice to the halls of DC and fight relentlessly for our families. But in order to do that, we must end the corruption in Congress by getting big money out of politics. That is why I am proud to be running on the strongest anti-corruption platform in the race to restore the voice of the people back to New York 3. I am very excited to begin tonight, and I welcome your questions, and thank you very much for having me.
Excellent. And we'll move to Jon Kaiman, please.
Thank you. And thank you for hosting the debate tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the voters. I'm Jon Kaiman. I'm running for Congress because I've been in public office for a number of years. I've served in many different capacities. I can see that right now, the place where experience is needed most is Washington, D.C. Congress is broken. The country is polarized. People are confused as to whether or not we can trust our government. And so I look to see what I've done in my past. I've run a town of North Hempstead. I was elected 5 times. It's a town of 240,000 people. People have given me their trust. I've had the opportunity to serve and fulfill a lot of the obligations and the responsibilities that we have in public office, meeting the challenges of communities that are looking for infrastructure and resources, making sure that their communities are safe, to make sure that their investment in their homes is being protected. And so I've done that. I've also served as a judge. I've served as a deputy county executive in Suffolk County. I've worked in the state governor's administration, helping Sandy relief, leading the way. And so I have a number of different roles that I've played. I believe right now, this is a time where we need to dig down and find the ability, the substance, the depth to be able to meet the challenges of the day, and experience counts. I have that experience, and I hope people will consider me for Congress and for the 3rd Congressional District.
Thank you very much. And we will move to Joshua Lafazan.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And thank you to everyone who's tuning in. My name is Josh Lafazan, and I proudly serve as Nassau County legislator. But this was not my first foray into government. In 2012, at the age of 18, I ran for the Syosset School Board of Education because the superintendent was overpaid and I wanted to make a difference. I won that election as a high school senior and was reelected. I then ran for county legislature when the county executive and the town supervisor here in Nassau County were simultaneously indicted on corruption charges. And I wanted to clean up local government, and I got elected. And as a Democrat representing a Trump district, I've held this seat 3 times, including in 2021, when we saw great Democrats across Long Island, the town level and the village level and the local levels. We saw great Democrats losing this red wave. I'm a Democrat who holds this seat in the Democratic column. And that's why I'm running for Congress, because there's a lot at stake in this country right now. There's a lot at stake for the things that we hold dear. A woman's right to choose is on the line. Gun violence is a uniquely American epidemic, and we are not doing nearly enough to stop it. It is too expensive to live in Queens. It's too expensive to live in Nassau County. And I know that I'm the Democrat who can keep this seat in Democratic hands. I know Tom Suozzi has represented this district admirably. I'm proud that Tom Suozzi has endorsed my candidacy. Tom Suozzi knows that I'm the common sense Democrat who can go to Washington and deliver for this district and pull together coalitions and get anybody who's willing to work together in a room and get things done. That's why I'm running. And I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, we have Robert Zimmerman.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Robert. And thank you, Schneps Media, for bringing us together at what I believe is the most defining time for our nation since the Civil War. The very foundations of our democracy are under assault, threatened by an extremist Supreme Court and extremist Republicans in Congress. You know, the very issues that brought me to my congressman's office in Bell Boulevard in Port Washington, where he had both his offices, first as a protester, then as a congressional intern, standing up for voting rights, addressing environmental injustice, addressing the gun violence pandemic, standing up for women's rights and for the LGBTQ plus community. These are the issues that define my life, the mission of my life. It brought me to Capitol Hill. I worked as a senior staffer for Long Island members of Congress. It elected me to the Democratic National Committee. And it also, in fact, brought me to the television networks, where I took on the right wing for the misinformation and their lies about our democracy and our republic. I'm very proud to say that as I've launched my campaign for Congress, I've assembled the largest coalition of endorsements from members of Congress in New York and around the country, elected officials, both women, leaders in civil rights, leaders in Planned Parenthood, leaders in the LGBTQ plus community, and local officials at every level, because they believe I have the dedication and the commitment to actually earn their support, that I have their trust to turn our democratic values into action and to deliver results. I look forward to your questions and the discussion this evening.
Thank you very much. And we'll start with the first question, and we'll start with Robert. We'll go in reverse order here.
Okay.
It's involving the SALT exemption. Congressman Suozzi, whom you're looking to succeed, has been outspoken in his efforts to have the SALT exemption lifted or reinstated, I should say, to give Queens and Long Island property owners some much needed economic relief. He faced some resistance from members of his own party who believe that appealing the exemption does more harm than good to the American taxpayer. Where do you stand in SALT, and would you consider Suozzi's push to lift it?
I'm sorry, the last part, consider Suozzi's
push to lift it, or to reinstate it, I guess.
Let me be very clear. I'm for a full restoration of SALT. It is absolutely, it was nothing more than a partisan hit, a political hit by the right wing and the Trump administration against New Yorkers and many members of the East Coast. It is truly unfair. In fact, to remove it is really just placing a double taxation on so many homeowners who are trying to survive in a very difficult economy and in the middle class. There are some running who say that they want a partial restoration of SALT. claiming that it benefits those on the high end of the economic spectrum too much. If you believe it's unfair to have salt removed, then you know you believe it's essential to restore it, then everyone should benefit from it, no matter what economic level you're at, because it's a matter of fairness. It's a matter of support for our economy and to give so many homeowners a chance to really, in fact, get some economic relief at a very difficult time.
Thank you. And we'll go to Joshua Lafazan.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Steve. And I think it's important to note that Tom Suozzi successfully moved this bill out of the House. And it's one of the reasons why Tom Suozzi supports me in this race, because salt is of paramount importance to our middle-class families and to all Long Island families and all Queens families. So of course I support restoration. But Steve, I want to talk about what I've done on taxation and affordability at the local level in office. I've never raised property taxes. And in fact, last year, I helped deliver a $70 million tax cut. I successfully led a coalition to suspend the Nassau County gas tax, and we should do it federally. I've worked with Nassau County Consumer Affairs to hold price gougers accountable. And we protected the senior citizen exemption, and we automatically re-enrolled seniors who were eligible to make it easier and more applicable to all. And at the national level, of course, we need to reinstate SALT, but we need to do so much more. We need to suspend the national gas tax. We need to stop corporate price gouging, allow Medicare to negotiate with prescription drug companies and lower the cost of prescription drugs, and so much more. And we'll get into a conversation tonight, but the answer is absolutely.
Excellent. And John, please.
Yes, the SALT is state and local tax deductions. We in New York have been able to deduct our local taxes, our state taxes, and rightfully so. Our state sends more money to Washington than we get back, more money than many states, most states in the country, and we deserve to be able to use our system in a way that benefits us so that we can continue to help fund the rest of the country in the way that we have in the past. For the state of New York and others like us, New Jersey, local, other eastern states, California, this was clearly as Robert said, it was a political hit. It was about going after Democratic states to fund tax cuts that the previous administration tried to impose or did impose throughout the country. And so I think that to focus on this very important issue, that we need to make sure that this deduction is restored. SALT deductions are restored. State and local taxes should be deductible. We in local government, those in state government, should have the federal advocates, the federal representatives supporting this effort. We appreciate Tom Suozzi taking the lead on that.
Excellent. And last, we have Melanie
D'Arrigo. Yes, thank you so much. So I think it's really important when we talk about these issues to talk about the context in which, Tom Suozzi was leading the charge on his No Salt, No Deal caucus. At that time, the choice was between a full repeal of SALT or funding much needed programs through Build Back Better, right? And what we were looking at that particular moment in time was either a full repeal of SALT or funding for universal childcare, universal pre-K, extending the child tax care credit, climate funding. And so, the compromise that came about with the Build Back Better plan was to raise the SALT cap to $75,000, which would overwhelmingly help middle-class families. Like it or not, Long Island is a very high cost of living area. And I think there's a lot we can do to deliver some real relief to taxpayers. But what we do know about the SALT deduction is that nearly 60% of it does go to help the 1%, with half of that going to help the 0.1%. So context is important. Okay, time.
Thank you.
Okay.
My colleague Robert will ask the next question.
Okay, thank you, candidates. So the new 3rd district includes plenty of shoreline along the Gold Coast of Long Island, as well as a piece of the South Shore, I believe. And all of it is at danger of rising sea levels due to climate change. But at the same time, there's greater need for keeping up with the energy demands through green technologies such as solar and wind power. What are your plans as a member of Congress to advocate for an increased energy capacity in the district, while also helping to move both the district and the country away from fossil fuel dependency? And for this round, we'll go back in reverse order, and we'll start with Ms. D'Arrigo.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the question. Look, I have been an adamant supporter of the Green New Deal framework for years. I do believe that our region, our particular district, is uniquely equipped to serve as a model of how we can address climate change. I believe strongly in transitioning to green renewable energy. That's really key, that it is renewable. But we have to look at within and work within the whole framework, right? So it's not just transitioning to green renewable energy. It's also looking at how do we reduce inequity and help the communities that have been on the front lines and bearing the brunt of climate injustice for many, many years. It's also a job creator, which we could really use in this region. Good union jobs would be amazing for all of Long Island and Queens. So there's quite a bit that can be done. It's not just about energy, but of course we can invest in more solar energy. Obviously, offshore wind, we can expand that, but we also have to look at ways to draw down carbon and reduce runoff, which is polluting not only our groundwater, but also the Long Island Sound as well.
Time.
That's okay. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kaiman.
Yes, right now as Deputy County Executive, one of the projects I'm taking the lead on is building a state-of-the-art jobs training facility where we are going to partner with local labor organizations and offshore wind experts and organizations to train the folks that we're going to need to develop the offshore wind technology and infrastructure so that we can be a leader in the state on alternative energy. Wind is something we have a lot of on Long Island, and that's not just in the political circles. It's actually in our nature, and so we really are poised to be a leader in this industry. And so one of the things that's important, if we want to develop the industry, we have to make sure that we have the workforce of doing that. So I'm developing that. I think that's an area where we can expand upon. Certainly solar energy and other alternatives need to be invested in. We've done that. I've done that as town supervisor. We built facilities that are Platinum LEED certified. The Yes We Can Center in Westbury is a Platinum LEED certified building. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Lafazan.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And I'm proud. Every year as legislator, I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club and the League of Conservation Voters because my commitment to fighting climate change as the existential threat of our times is non-negotiable. And I represent a coastal community here on the North Shore of Nassau County, and we've worked to protect that community, to protect Bayville, make sure West Shore Road has increased flooding, make sure a new Bayville Bridge, $15 million record investment, is done to make sure that residents have safe evacuations during emergencies. So just like I protected the coastal communities in my district, I'll protect the coastal communities all across this district. But quite frankly, we have to lead on clean energy. Right? We have to lead, and we can lead here on Long Island. So whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether it's exploring geothermal, we're going to need our federal representative to help deliver money to Long Island, not just to help create jobs here and to help stimulate our economy, but to help local municipalities who are obviously restricted by the tax cap from offsetting those costs. Right, because we don't want to shift the burden onto local taxpayers. So we need a member of Congress who's going to fight for those dollars and bring it home. I've done it locally. That can do it at the federal level.
All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Zimmerman.
Virtually every part of our district, and for that matter, every part of our country has faced the ramifications of severe weather and the tragedies it's brought to so many people. Just in our own congressional district, in the borough of Queens, outside of our district, 11 people died living in substandard apartments because of severe flooding as the remnants of Hurricane Ida. And virtually every community has seen severe flood damage and the impact on homes and property, businesses, and personal loss of life. And it's affected so many because of severe weather. So we have to recognize we're living in a New Deal moment in our nation. We're living in an era where I would and other members of Congress have called for a Marshall Plan to develop clean energy union jobs so that we can transition effectively to renewables, wind, solar, for example, hydropower. There's so many opportunities on Long Island in particular, especially with the infrastructure funding that was appropriated. The real challenge for the next Congress member is to bring that funding home so we can retrofit our sewage treatment plants to protect the Long Island Sound, so we can in fact do seed plantings to avoid flooding along the Sound. So there are many great opportunities we can pursue. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
All right, Steve, back to you.
All right, everybody take a quick breath. Everybody doing good? All right, we're going to move to election integrity here. The House January 6th committee hearings have exposed what many describe is an attempt by the former president and his supporters to use Congress to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. What will you do as a member of Congress to ensure that the will of the people, regardless of party, is upheld? Will you support a strengthening of the Electoral Count Act? And we will start in the middle this time. So let's start with Mr. Kaiman.
Yes, I think that we do need to strengthen the Electoral Count Act, and I know there's work on that going on right now in a bipartisan fashion. And I think that we need to look to not only federal government but the state governments. One of the great concerns is that secretaries of state and the people who are in charge of elections throughout our country are being pressured and in many cases lost. They're leaving their jobs. They're being bullied out of those jobs. We need to create a national support system for our electoral process. We need to change the laws federally. We need to make sure that we protect the people locally. I think in the long run, people are seeing the danger of allowing somebody such as the former president use the power that he had to put at risk the peaceful transition of power. It's becoming real as we watch those hearings. I think as more information comes out, more of the population, Republicans and Democrats, will ultimately support the strengthening of the laws that we have and finding new ways to give support to local governments to provide secure elections.
Excellent. Mr. Lafazan.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And what we witnessed on January 6th was, in no uncertain terms, an insurrection aimed at overthrowing our democracy. And it's stunning to see how close those rioters came, both to impeding the electoral count as well as harming our elected officials and first responders. So, of course, we need to pass the Electoral Count Act. We need to put it in writing that the vice president does not have a role in overturning the will of the people and that states cannot change their methods of electors after an election. But we need to do more. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, right? We know that the Supreme Court drove a dagger through the heart of the Voting Rights Act in 2013. We need to bring back federal power to regulate claims of voter suppression and to make sure that people in states where voter suppression is ongoing have their voices heard and have their recourse in court. And we also need to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. It's time Election Day becomes a federal holiday. It's time states all across this country have 2 weeks of early voting. It's time that we allow voting by mail with no excuse. It's time that we require states to make voting more accessible for people with disabilities. And it's time that we finally outlaw partisan gerrymandering.
Thank you. Ms. D'Arrigo.
Yes, thank you. So, we're living in a time where we have seen presidential elections lost when we had the popular vote. I think it's time that we get rid of the Electoral College, and that is where I would be working. That is where my focus would be. However, let me say that there is nothing more important than our democracy, and we all watched in horror on January 6th, where we saw, citizens of this country scaling the wall and breaking windows to break into our Capitol. These insurrectionists must be held accountable. We must strengthen democracy at every turn. And that, unfortunately, we did lose because of the Senate. We did not pass H.R. 1. I believe that is a direct response to corporate PAC money and lobbyist money flooding and corrupting our system. So it's not just democracy reform. It is also campaign finance reform and a publicly financed elections that we need to be pushing for to shore up our representative democracy. Because right now, most of our representatives are not representing us. They're representing the lobbyists.
Thank you.
Very good. And Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes. The Electoral Count Act is just the minimum that should be done. Ultimately, the Electoral College should be abolished because it undermines our democracy. It doesn't allow for one person, one vote. But the bigger issue here is this. When we recognize what the insurrectionists did, which was really a domestic terrorist attack on our nation, our democracy, on our electoral process, we also have to hold accountable those co-conspirators, those enablers, the Republicans in Congress who either try to whitewash this, try to undermine our electoral process, and try to really, in fact, enable this type of insurrection through their congressional role. We have a crisis in our democracy, and to a great degree, it's because of of the system by which we fund campaigns. As a candidate for Congress, I've made the pledge not to take any corporate political action committee money because this system where members of Congress are bankrolling their campaigns from the very special interest they're supposed to be regulating has to stop. Not everybody running in this race has taken that pledge, and I think there should be accountability there. Melanie has joined me in that pledge. I just think she should be acknowledged for that.
Thank you. And I will bring in my colleague, Robert again for the
Okay.
next.
Thank you very much. So the next question is on reproductive rights. And as we know, recently the House passed legislation that would codify abortion rights, though it is unclear, or unlikely rather, that the bill will pass the evenly split Senate this session. When the bill is introduced in the future, will you support codifying the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling into federal law? And also, would you support any changes to the Supreme Court as it's currently constructed in terms of either numbers of members or whether lifetime membership should remain? So we're starting from the middle this time, and we'll start with Mr. Lafazan first.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And the Supreme Court decision on Roe was a disaster. I've always unequivocally been pro-choice, and the idea that the government or I as a man have the right to tell a woman what to do with her body is outrageous. So I've led here on the local level. I've helped work with first responders to make sure we're increasing police presence at our abortion services and reproductive service clinics so that no woman seeking reproductive services or abortion services is subject to harassment or care. And of course, at the federal level, we need to codify Roe into law. Of course, we need to work to secure the data privacy of women who purchase abortion pills online. Of course, we need to protect out-of-state doctors and providers who deliver reproductive and abortion services. And we need to fight any effort by the federal government to permit red states to pursue charges against women seeking out-of-state abortions. On the second topic, it's a lot to pack in probably the 10 seconds I have, but I'll say I support Supreme Court reform. I think we need a binding code of ethics for our justices. We need term limits because, quite frankly, we need to depoliticize the court and make sure that we take politics out of the nomination process, a set timetable for those nominations. The Senate can advise and consent. Mitch McConnell doesn't rule by fiat.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my alarm's going
Just
off.
real quick, so you support adding more Supreme Court justices?
No, Steve, I support the reform package that has been proposed, which is really 4 parts. I'm happy to talk about it now, or I want to be respectful to my colleagues.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Mr. Kaiman?
Yeah, so I certainly support the Women's Health Protection Act and would vote to codify it. I think that the Supreme Court has got it wrong. I think that they misunderstood the substantive due process and how it applies to liberty under the 14th Amendment. I think that they've narrowly tailored their decision in such a way that makes it impossible for us to protect rights that we've already understand to be fundamental to our system. And so I think that the court has it wrong, and because of that, we need to address court reform. What that looks like remains to be seen. I think what's really important is that we get people together as Congress, as the judicial expertise, and make sure that we're addressing those issues and address whether or not how long a judge should serve, whether or not we need more judges. I don't think we should just make outright assertions one way or the other. I think there's a lot of depth that needs to go into that. Ultimately, women's health protection is critical, and the real concern now is not only whether or not states are going to ban abortion, criminalize women's health. Are we going to be able to protect women in states that allow for women to be protected? And that's the question that we need to defend in Congress and locally.
Thank you. Mr. Zimmerman?
Sure. Certainly, obviously, I stand for support for codifying Roe v. Wade and support for the Women's Health Protection Act. I think we've got to go further than that. We've got to repeal the Hyde Amendment and the Helms Amendment. We've got to make sure contraception rights are protected too. The bottom line of the Supreme Court's decision, while it certainly was a direct assault on women's freedom, it also was a message to people in my community, the LGBTQ plus community, that you're next up because they're going to go after our rights too. Rights to marry, right to adopt. This is an assault on personal freedoms, and there is no judicial interpretation for what they did. It's an extremist, demagogic strategy by the court. That's why I call for impeaching Clarence Thomas. It's long past due. I support holding the justices of the Supreme Court to strict ethics standards, which they are not accountable to right now. And I would bring the justices appointed by Donald Trump before Congress to be held accountable for lying about respecting precedent and supporting the rule of law. So those are steps we could take. I certainly support term limits for Supreme Court justices as well. I think those are important steps to be taken. But the way to address this, the way we're going to deal with this seriously, is not on Twitter hits, by electing more Democrats who stand up for these issues.
All right, thank you. And Ms. D'Arrigo.
Yes, thank you so much. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm endorsed by the National Organization for Women. I'm also endorsed by Vote Pro-Choice, and there's a reason for that. And that's because I've been fighting on the front lines to expand reproductive rights for years. In fact, it was me that pushed the current Congressman Tom Suozzi to finally support the Each Woman Act, which would repeal the Hyde Amendment. Do I support codifying Roe? I don't just support it. I'm going to fight tooth and nail for it. And yes, I very much support the Judiciary Act, which would expand the Supreme Court. It would add 4 more justices, 13 justices to match the 13 circuits that we currently have. Listen, women are going to die. Trans men are going to die. Non-binary people are going to die because they cannot get abortion care. We do not have time to wait to adjust the composition of Congress. We need to do everything we can, because don't for a second think that Mitch McConnell won't go ahead and expand that Supreme Court, and then we're going to be in for a world of hurt. We need to do everything we can to protect reproductive health and protect the citizens of this country. I even wrote a policy about getting the money out of the judiciary system, but maybe I'll talk about that a little later. Thank you.
Do we have the opportunity to rebut
Sure.
that part? Just on the issue of expanding the court, if we add 4 judges, we don't know that the Democrats are going to get to pick those judges. So just to throw out the idea that we can do this, let's just make it happen because we're going to will it into power or will it into happening is not necessarily real. Putting 4 new judges can be even more dangerous, and then we have no ability to actually change the structure of the court. So I would be very cautious about leaping into something without really thinking it through.
Can I rebut that?
I think everybody can get a rebuttal. Let's,
Okay, let me move a rebuttal on that, if I may.
Okay.
yeah.
First, Melanie, I'm proud you were with me when we both pressured Tom Suozzi to finally stand up and support repealing the Hyde Amendment. But one of the reasons I've been endorsed by just retired Planned Parenthood President Joanne Smith of Nassau County Planned Parenthood and the former chair of the Planned Parenthood National Board, Jill Lafer, and by other pro-choice leaders is because I've been front and center on this issue, because I recognize the pro-choice movement as a movement for women, certainly, but also a movement that stands up for freedom for everyone, people in the LGBT community as well, people in the trans community. That being said, expand, okay.
Yeah, 30 seconds. Ms. D'Arrigo?
Yes, thank you. So I just want to quickly rebut what Jon said earlier. Look, the Supreme Court has been, the number of justices has been changed 7 times in our history. This is not a radical idea. This is not a willy-nilly idea. And all due respect, gentlemen on this call, as the only person with a uterus running for Congress, yes, you can bet and the voters can count on me to fight tooth and nail, and I will use every tool in the toolbox to make sure we are protecting our rights, including expanding the court.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Lafazan, want to be fair if we didn't give you a chance to rebut here.
Sure. So I'll just use the balance of my time to talk about that reform package that I mentioned before. Right. At the end of the day, of course, the Supreme Court needs reform because we need to restore the people's trust in the judicial branch of government. And so I support term limits for judges to depoliticize the court and give all presidents the same number of appointments. I believe in setting timetables, specific timetables for presidential nominations and for the Senate to advise and consent. I support that binding code of ethics to make sure that our justices and their spouses don't have conflicts of interest. And I support live streaming of the oral arguments and decisions. It's time to bring sunlight into the court.
All right, thank you. All right, Steve.
Just to switch it up, let's go to the part right here in the middle of the debate where each candidate can ask another candidate a question, and we will give that candidate a minute to answer. And let us start with Mr. Lafazan. You can ask away to another candidate.
Yeah, so I'm glad you answered that, Stephen. With due respect, I don't think we as Democrats should be trying to one-up each other in this debate. I think our questions should be focused on what we'd asked George Santos and the Republican in November. I think we're all doing our best to tell the voters what we stand for, and the voters will judge us on election day. But I don't think we should be trying to one-up each other. So with due respect, I'll pass.
Okay, so we will go to Mr. Kaiman. Do you have any questions for a fellow candidate?
Yeah, we also talked about that in our camp, and the idea of asking some of the others questions. I respect where they're all coming from, and would love to engage with them in the long conversation. But to ask a question for a minute response, I don't know that we'd get to where we'd want to go on that. So I'll pass as well.
Excellent. And Mr. Zimmerman.
You know, I don't believe we should be engaging in gotcha moments when we're having so many important policy issues ahead of us. Now, I certainly have many major differences with some of the candidates running on key issues. I want to discuss that in debate format, but I don't think playing gotcha moments is really the way to do it. So I think we should be focusing on the issues and certainly focusing on our differences, but this is not the way to do it.
All right, and you agree with that, Ms. D'Arrigo?
No, I don't. I appreciate my candidate. I appreciate the other candidates saying that, but I do have a question. Particularly, I'm happy to see you here, Josh. I know you often have to cut out of these things, so I do have a question for you, and it is regarding the unconstitutional bill that you put up in the Nassau County Legislature to allow active and retired police officers to sue protesters for up to $50,000. Letitia James told County Executive Curran that it is unconstitutional, and so County Executive Curran did not sign that bill into law. And I'm just wondering if you could explain that. I mean, you're running for Congress, where you should understand our constitutional rights and protections, yet you authored this bill. So I was wondering if you could explain yourself there, and why you think you're ready to go to Congress when you're writing on constitutional bills on the Nassau County legislative level.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. And let me take the opportunity to correct the record. First responders were already a protected class in Nassau County in 2019, and they already had the right to sue for damages. My bill simply empowered the county attorney to offer additional assistance to first responders. When the county executive vetoed that bill, I upheld the veto because it's my job to listen to the community before I support a bill. That was my mistake, and I've done it since. But I passed a record number of bills in the legislature. I passed a record number of bills since. I'll do the same in Congress. Thank you, Steve.
May I rebut that point, please?
Sure.
Okay. I think it's
Very
important to
technical.
note, Josh, that you deliberately did not meet with the NAACP despite their effort to meet with you. You didn't meet with the LGBTQ network on Long Island when they wanted to meet with you about this. What you're trying to do by making police a protected class, what really is to undermine the protected class law. You were allowing law enforcement to sue private citizens at taxpayer expense because people might be offended by what was being said at a protest. It was ruled unconstitutional because it was more than, it was not just unconstitutional, it was an extreme abuse of your authority. It was a demagogic attempt to try to attract Trump voters, and really was undermine the rule of law in our county.
Thank you.
And so I'll take my 30 seconds as well, if I could.
Okay.
And just to make the point that I too disagree with that law. I think it was inappropriate. You know, we in Suffolk County, where I was working at the time, worked with our police and worked out ways to make sure that everyone was protected and respected. And we did it through an intergovernmental and community task force. That law was more than, just the soundbite that you gave it. And there was a reason why people were upset about it. And that was because it really was undermining the fabric of the constitutional fundamental rights that people have to contest things that are going on in their community. And I think the police respected that and appreciated that ultimately as well.
Yes, Steve, if I may.
Hold on. I think we should give Mr. D'Arrigo a chance to rebut.
Oh, there's another rebuttal? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't know I was getting another one. I'm happy to take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to
back
say,
to-
just a clarification point. I didn't say it was a bill to make police a protected class. We know that was already in place. I just wonder, it's a curious bill since it really focused in on allowing retired and active police officers to sue protesters for up to $50,000 with irrefutable presumption. And as you know, I was there that day of the vote and spoke out against that bill, along with other community leaders and civil rights leaders in the Black community. So just want to make that clarification.
All right. And Mr. Lafazan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify for the audience, and you could tell why our campaign is leading in the polls, because we're focused on what we're doing. We're not trying to play one up, even though we just said we weren't. But here's what I'll say. Police and first responders and civil servants in the state have had the right to sue since 1996. So this blatant mischaracterization of what happened is outrageous. Quite frankly and fundamentally, I believe if we don't protect us, if we can't protect those who protect us, then we lack safety ourselves. That was the impetus behind this bill. But the mischaracterization is outrageous. I'm going to focus on speaking to the people. That's why we're going to win this race.
Okay.
The next question is coming from one of our viewers who's watching, one of the participants in the debate. And the question is, to help reduce automobile and truck traffic, and more importantly, air quality in the 3rd Congressional District, what do you think of bringing back, and I guess help to fund, the proposed Cross Long Island Sound Bridge or tunnel from the past, which could be infrastructure money? And we will start with Mr. Zimmerman. We'll go on.
I am unalterably opposed to a Long Island Sound tunnel or a Long Island Sound bridge. It would, in fact, add to pollution, add to congestion, It would be a totally counterproductive effort, and it would be not just damaging to our environment and abusive to our wetlands and abusive to our quality of life. It would bring an unprecedented number of traffic onto Long Island as well. So I don't think it's certainly not an answer. I certainly think we have to improve our mass transit on Long Island for sure to reduce gas emission. We have to have a bus system that actually works. We have air quality problems throughout the Sound, well documented and severe. That's why we've got to transition to renewables for our energy. We've got to have electric buses and electric buses that are powered not by fossil fuel plants, but powered by renewables. So let me be clear, that is the wrong way to go, entirely counterproductive.
All right, Mr. Lafazan.
Yeah, so I was the first Democrat on Long Island to come out against this proposal. I believe the Cuomo administration in the state was wrong, and I represent the area where that tunnel would have started. It would have started in Bayville, and there would have been enormous exhaust stacks, and it would have absolutely destroyed our wildlife that the local economy depends on. It would have destroyed the air quality here. Quite frankly, 80,000 cars a day would have used that proposed tunnel. It was going to be over budget, which is going to cost all taxpayers who wouldn't even use the tunnel, and it wouldn't even save that much time. And so if we want to talk about reducing air pollution, let's talk about expanding electric vehicle charging stations, not only increasing the rebate that homeowners get when they purchase an electric vehicle, but let's extend tax breaks for those who put charging stations, commercial landlords, in their parking lots. We need more of them. Let's make sure that we're delivering infrastructure money to help offset the cost for municipalities to upgrade their buildings, to become LEED certified, to use solar and to use offshore wind. And I've done all of this. On the Syosset School Board, our buildings were greener than they were in the history of the district. In the Nassau County Legislature, I helped deliver record investments in clean energy. I've done it at the local level and the county level. I'll do it again at the federal level.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaiman.
Yeah, so one of the challenging things about Josh's answers is that it's in this perfect soundbite where he's done all these wonderful things, most of which aren't real or just kind of superficial things that one points to. He's the first Democrat who's voted on something or supported something when it started before he was born. This is not even an issue that he could have been the first person, yet he has no problem laying claim to being that person. I think understanding a little bit more history, depth, substance, being a little bit more humbled about maybe that you're not the person that actually everyone evolves around might give us a little bit more of a deeper conversation. This is an issue that has affected this community for decades, generations. They're concerned about the impact on the Bay, on the Sound, what that would mean to the local communities on the border, on the waterfront, and internally, how much traffic would we get coming in from other areas. And so the answer has to lie in other areas than building a tunnel. It's not viable. It's not something we should consider. We need to, as Robert said, look to other solutions, and they are out there.
Steve, do I get a rebuttal here?
Let's let Ms. D'Arrigo go in. And
After I was personally insulted? Okay.
Well, I didn't get to answer the question yet, so
Yeah, sure, you can answer.
thank you. Yeah, so I think, that we community members have spoken out and are not in favor of this. I think Jon and Robert made some great points about disrupting wildlife and ecosystems, and that is not something we want to do. In fact, we want to do the opposite. We want to rebuild ecosystems, particularly in the Sound. And while electric vehicles are a piece of the puzzle, I'm more focused on expanding green public transportation. We don't even really talk about boating. Boating just spews tons of oil into our water. We need to invest in new technologies for green boating, which is exorbitantly expensive right now. And so my focus would really be on looking at green public transportations. But I agree with Jon and Robert, this is not viable at the moment.
You want to rebut, Mr. Lafazan?
Sure, I'll speak to Mr. Kaiman, and a reminder to the entire audience that I'm the only elected official on this dais, and I don't take ad hominem cheap shots at people. I stick to the issues. And so what I was referring to was in 2018, when the Cuomo administration put this proposal in the budget and it became real for the first time in decades, and this was happening, Democrats were afraid to speak up. And this is my district. So I convened a public session in Bayville. I stood up and was the first Democrat on Long Island to say, absolutely not. This cannot happen. It will ruin the ecosystem in our community. It will absolutely harm our economy. 80,000 cars in a residential community is outrageous. And I was proud to do that.
I just have to rebut that point for a moment, just as a matter of decency. Every Democrat spoke up. In fact, I organized the press conference voluntarily to bring everyone together.
It was before the press conference. It's a matter of public record.
Assemblyman Chuck Levine spoke up courageously
Matter of-
on the issue.
First-
Openers.
My colleague Robert has a follow-up to that.
Yeah, just to get back to the topic at hand, and I know that I know it was mentioned, the concern about bringing trucks and
Yeah.
cars into the roads, but with the focus being on mass transit, and one has to wonder if somebody decided to build a mass transit only bridge, a train tunnel or a train bridge across the Sound, is that something that would change your mind? I'll give each of you guys 30 seconds to respond. Mr. Zimmerman, you want to start?
Yes, of course. No, it wouldn't, because it has the same impact. Because after these trains arrive, it's going to require more cars to move around. We don't have any sort of bus system. And we have to make sure it's an electric bus system to reduce air pollution. And so it doesn't work under any system because of what it does to our ecosystem, what it does to our quality of life, what it does to our environment. And I just have to point out, in fairness, to Senator Jimmy Gorin, Democrat Senator Jimmy Gorin spoke up proudly and boldly. Assemblyman Chuck Levine did, Supervisor Judy Bosworth did, County Executive Laura Curran did. So the notion, Josh, and I know you want to get your moment, but there has to be a sense of decency and a sense of honor in terms of respecting all the people who led and you followed.
Okay, Mr. Lafazan?
Sure. So it's a perfect example for all the viewers. I'm an elected official. I've won 5 elections. I serve the people. I focus on what I do for the people. I don't attack others personally. I don't attack them during forums. I speak directly to the people. I was the first Democrat to speak up, and I'm proud a coalition of amazing Democrats joined me. I never said they didn't, but I was proud to be the first, and I'm proud to have the courage to be the first. And answering your question, it wouldn't change my mind because the science and the engineering behind the tunnel wouldn't change. You would need, because of the duration of the tunnel, it'd be one of the longest in the world. You'd need these exhaust stacks that would be in the middle of Bayville. We don't have the infrastructure simply to do it. So it wouldn't change my mind.
Mr. Kaiman, you want to respond to the question about the bridge?
Yeah, I think I would have the same answer. I think that certainly what Robert pointed out was the ecosystem that has to be disturbed. The impact is still the same, and so we should be focusing on the ferry service. It's a wonderful ride across the bay, the Sound. That would be a good way to go. I think that there's other answers for our community, for Long Island, and I don't think building a tunnel under any circumstances would be appropriate.
Okay, and finally, Ms. D'Arrigo.
Yes, my answer is also the same. In fact, I recently wrote a local climate policy, which included rebuilding our local shoreline ecosystems. We need to be doing all that we can to filter out the nitrogen and and the carbon from the Long Island Sound. There are many interventions that we can absolutely do that are very realistic. We need to be building back our ecosystems, not disrupting them and further, essentially killing off our wildlife.
Thank you. So let's move to whether you're in Congress, and it's a part question that we came up with and a part from a participant. What would you do in Congress to work across the aisle? I know Congressman Suozzi, touted his membership as a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a bipartisan group of Congress members that regularly propose possible solutions to difficult issues on Capitol Hill. And the other thing is you might be elected, you might become the minority in Congress if polls turn out correct. So if elected, do you plan on filling Suozzi's seat on the Problem Solvers Caucus? Or do you believe there's a better way in getting things done for the district and working across the aisle? I guess throwing it all into a gumbo. And let's start with Ms. D'Arrigo.
Yes, thank you. So I most certainly will not be filling a seat on the Problem Solvers Caucus. Let's be very clear, although it claims to be a bipartisan caucus, it is really a caucus that does the bidding of corporate PACs and lobbyists. That's what it's always been, and that's how it continues to operate today. We need a representative in this district that will fight for our communities, and that is just what I intend to do. I say this a lot, we talk about bipartisanship as it being, the ultimate, the holy grail. And in theory, we should be trying to work together. But we cannot work together with people who are not negotiating in good faith. We cannot work together with people who are trying to dismantle our democracy. We can't give an inch there. We can't give an inch on human rights. We can't give an inch on civil rights. Now, that being said, I do think there are areas and there are issues and policies we can come together, and we should focus on that. But, you know, we've got Democrats have to start playing offense. Enough of the defense, enough of giving away everyone's rights. It's time to start to deliver for the American people. And that's what I'll do.
So if you're in the minority, you'll just stand your ground and.
It's not about standing your ground. I mean, it is about standing your ground, but it is also about not, I mean, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is halfway to rolling back someone's civil rights look like? What is halfway to dismantling marriage equality look like? That doesn't sound like a kind of world that I want to live in. So you're damn right. I'm going to stand my ground in those issues. Now, on other policies where civil rights and human rights are not under attack, I think there's opportunity to negotiate, but we've got to educate. We've got to stop gaslighting, and we've got to work together in good faith because, okay.
Mr. Kaiman.
Yes, no, I would not be joining the Problem Solvers Caucus. I do believe that we need to work across the aisle. And I think that as a Democrat who believes in the Democratic Party, has been a Democrat and will continue to be a Democrat, that the focus should be on the issues that are important to us. And then how do we get other legislators to join forces? There have been bipartisan bills in the past. There's some even recently. The $50 billion going to semiconductor chips and others where we're growing our manufacturing. There's supporting Ukraine. There's areas where we can come together. We have to find, how do we get the American people to believe that we can talk to each other and respect each other and then vote on issues of importance to each other. And when we can do that, congressmen will come along. We don't need to join a caucus that isn't sure which side we're on. I know which side I'm on. I'm on the Democratic side.
Mr. Lafazan.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And I absolutely plan to take Tom Suozzi's seat on the Problem Solvers Caucus. And people want somebody who's going to work to build coalitions and get things done. And Steve, I think it's why I've gotten reelected twice and I've served for 3 terms in a Trump district as a Democrat. It's because I've pulled together coalitions to get things done. And you asked what I'll do at the federal level. I want to model the success I've had at the local level, working across the aisle to build on progress for veterans. Locally, I passed the Dignity for Our Heroes package, where we're going to build housing for homeless vets at Mitchell Field. And I passed the Hiring Our Heroes package, where we're going to pipeline unemployed vets into good county union jobs. I worked with Republican Bill Gaylor, who was a veteran, and I worked with my Republican and Democratic colleagues to get that done. And we're making a difference in the lives of our heroes who fought for this country. I think we can get that done at the federal level, and I aim to work across the aisle to do it.
And Mr. Zimmerman.
You know, having worked on Capitol Hill and worked with Democratic leaders, both nationally and in Congress, let me assure you, Josh, it's not like the Nassau County Legislature. I am not going to be joining the Problem Solvers Caucus. Let me be clear. The way the caucus is structured by its very nature, where they keep all their caucus votes secret, and if you stay in the caucus, you've got to vote with 70% of the caucus, is unacceptable to me. I will never join a caucus where I have to keep my vote secret from my constituents. I will never join a caucus where, in order to stay in it, I've got to vote with 70% of them. I'm going to Congress to represent my constituents, stand up for the values that have defined my life. And that's the purpose here. Now, certainly, let me be clear. When there are opportunities to work in a bipartisan way, I'm going to seek that out. We have an opportunity to do that with veterans issues. And certainly we saw that when we protested the closing of the Northport VA. And I met with congressional leaders about that. We have an opportunity to work in a bipartisan way to protect the Long Island Sound. And I've been endorsed by leaders of that movement, like Nancy Seligson, because of the urgency of doing it. But let's be clear, the only way to achieve real reform is by holding your ground and electing more people with you, building a national consensus. That's how you get it done.
Yeah, Steve, I was invoked. I'd like to rebut if that's okay.
Sure, 30
seconds.
Thank you. The condescension is unique, Robert, because you ran for office 3 times and lost 3 times. And I have a history of winning as a Democrat in a Trump district. And so I believe my experience getting things done in Nassau is exactly the experience voters want to see going to Washington. I think my ability to get things done on the school board, taking on an overpaid superintendent, is exactly the type of experience the voters want to see. So I will let the condescension slide, but
can I rebut?
It's going to make a difference. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
Thank you. I feel compelled because I think it's really important for voters to have transparency. There's a lot of liberal use of the word Democrat being thrown around right now. And I think it's important for voters to know that Josh Lafazan just registered to become a Democrat in December. In fact, he ran on the conservative line in, I think, most, or if not all, of his legislative seats, and even gave money to the Conservative Party last year. I'll also remind voters that the Conservative Party was celebrating overturning Roe v. Wade. So it is important when we talk about transparency. It is important when we talk about our values and what we're going to fight for. But it's no surprise, because my last point, no surprise, because the Problem Solvers Caucus is funded by right-wing billionaires. So that's not really a surprise.
Thank you. All right.
If I may rebut for a moment, let me just say
One last.
Go all night.
Okay, let me just say, I'm very proud of the fact that when I was in my 20s and early 30s, I stood up as a Democrat in very Republican Nassau County, in very Republican districts, and stood up for the principles of Planned Parenthood, standing up on environmental injustice, standing up on voting rights, and the issue we still talk about today, standing up against gun violence. Yes, I didn't win those elections when I was very young, that's true. I also didn't take the Conservative Party line like Josh did. I also didn't donate to the Republican Party and the Conservative Party. I stood for democratic principles, and I still am. That's why I have the most endorsements from members of Congress and from elected officials, because they know they can trust me to stand for democracy.
Steve, if I keep getting invoked, do I get to respond?
Wait, Mr. Kaiman, and we're going to move to closing statements because we're running out of time, but it's been very, feisty to say the least. Mr. Kaiman.
Yeah, so, and again, there is a reason why Josh is kind of the subject of our discussion a lot. And it's because we've been watching what's been going on and the words that are coming out and how they're being expressed and the soundbite and the laying claim and credit for all sorts of things that we who have been in government have been, and I've been elected 6 times, and I've served hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, and I'm doing so now, as a matter of fact, as deputy county executive. Understand that there's a lot more to this process than winning any particular election. This is about who you are as a person. This is about what you can achieve collectively, not just the I and me, and this is what I did, and I get credit for this and credit for that. And I think that we realize that there's something greater here that we should be pursuing, as opposed to this narrow focus to this one person who focuses on himself.
Yep.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to our closing statements because matter of fact, we're going to limit the closing statements to a minute because we are running out of time. So let's start with Mr. Zimmerman.
Thank you. And once again, my thanks to both of you and to Schnepp's Media for this opportunity. And yes, we have differences, and we've expressed them this evening, but we have to be very mindful of what's in front of us. And that is standing up to George Santos, the Republican Magna Trump endorsed nominee for Congress, standing up to protect our rights as citizens, standing up to protect our affordability and our future for the middle class of our congressional district. Those are the issues before us. And these are the issues that have defined why I'm running. They've defined why I've received the broad range of endorsements I have received throughout this district, because we have to stand up in respect for the labor community. We have to stand up with women. We have to stand up with the gay community. We have to stand up for civil rights and social justice. My campaign and the issues that we're talking about in this race are much bigger than about me, but the future of our country and the kind of safe and secure district we want to live in. I'm running for Congress with that pledge, with that trust that's defined my life. I ask for your support and ask the chance to earn your trust.
Thank you. Mr. Lafazan.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for having us, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. I want to speak directly to the voters. There's a lot at stake in this country. There's a lot on the line, and I know that I'm the Democrat running who's best suited to keep this seat in Democratic hands. I have experience of winning elections and winning for my constituents, and I'm ready to go to Washington to deliver for this community, to deliver for Nassau County, and to deliver for Queens. So if you want to get to learn more about us, go to joshlafazan.com. Read about our policy positions. If you want to get involved and want to volunteer, if you have a young person who wants to intern, please get involved. I hope you'll consider voting for me. It's been great to be here, and I look forward to meeting many of you on the campaign trail in the closing days. Thank you.
Mr. Kaiman.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be heard tonight. It really is a wonderful opportunity. I'm running for Congress because I understand how government works. I understand the challenges that we face. I've been on the front lines as an elected official, as a public servant, as an attorney. I understand the issues that we're facing legally, and as somebody who's been studying this. I was a constitutional lawyer for a while as well. I've handled such cases in federal court. I think that right now the country's at the breaking point. We're on the brink. We need confidence. We need to give people confidence that those who are elected can protect us, can fulfill the obligations that we have as public servants, can give people confidence that the institutions of government will be preserved. I think that my history of dealing with crisis in various positions of authority and responsibility suggests that I do have a well-rounded, a deep, and a substantive experience that will allow me to go and make that fight, stand up for the Democratic Party, stand up for the country, and succeed in getting us through the crisis times that we're in right now.
Thank you. And Ms. D'Arrigo.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's certainly been fun. And thank you to the other candidates who have been wonderful sports this evening. Look, our campaign is built on the idea that change is possible. We have been hard at work exciting the base and bringing in new voters. And that's exactly what we're going to need this November. I'm proud to have the most organizational endorsements and the broadest coalition of support in this race. But let's be clear, the road ahead will be long and it will be hard. But from the general to legislating in Congress, we will need a fighter if we want to get it done. As an organizer, as a mother, I believe that I am the candidate that will fight hardest for our families. And we are going to need someone relentless. It is a mission to end the corruption and bring the Democratic Party back home to its roots, protecting and fighting for working families. I'm fighting for universal health care, common sense gun safety legislation, voting rights, and reproductive rights. I hope you'll join us. If you'd like to find out more information, please visit D'Arrigo2022.com. Thank you very much.
We want to thank each of you, the candidates, for your time and your commitment. And we want to thank you, the audience, many members, for joining us. And remember, in this unusual primary year, you have to get out and vote. Early voting begins August 13th with the primary on the 23rd. It's your job as a citizen. So go vote. Thank you all and have a great evening. On behalf of me, Robert Pozarycki, Schneps Media, amNewYork, and PoliticsNY.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.